Good evening, everyone. This is Bev Cotton, and I am co-chair of the Hillsborough County Dems. And my partner in crime, Katie Cudshall, is also here with us tonight. And we are so pleased to be able to have the opportunity to hear directly from our Executive Council District 5 candidates. It's just so important to have the opportunity to hear directly from them. And so we are very, very, very happy to be able to bring this to you tonight. And moderating our conversation tonight is Representative Catherine Rombeau from Bedford. She's currently serving her second term as state rep from Bedford and serves on the House Transportation Committee. She's a former town councilor, and she was elected to the State House in a special election in October of 2021, where she garnered national headlines as the first flip of a legislative seat from Republican to Democrat in the Biden administration. Catherine is an attorney specializing in labor and employment law. This spring, she was the prime sponsor on HB 1296, and that was signed into law by the governor. This life-saving piece of legislation removes patient costs for follow-up of diagnostic breast imaging, often necessary after mammograms with concerns. Having these follow-up procedures covered by insurance means earlier diagnosis, better chances of beating cancer, and saving lives. So we thank you so very much for this work. So I am going to turn it over and put it in your capable hands of going forward with this wonderful evening of information that we're going to be getting from these two wonderful candidates.
Thank you, Bev. Thank you for the nice introduction. I'm excited to be here with everybody. And actually, your comments reminded me how much the kind of work we're trying to do at the State House depends on having a strong coalition of folks across different offices in New Hampshire. So I'm really excited for the Executive Council race this year and all the districts and all the hard work I see going on. So despite you giving me a very nice introduction, I am going to let our candidates give their introductions tonight because they can tell us a little bit more about themselves. But I do want to introduce the Honorable Melanie Levesque and Alderwoman Shoshanna Kelly, who are, as you mentioned, both in the Democratic primary for the District 5 Executive Council race. And I will first, I guess, introduce Melanie to let her tell us a little bit about herself and her candidacy.
Well, thank you very much, Representative Rombeau, and thank you so much to the Hillsborough County Democratic Committee. You're doing an amazing job. So my name is Melanie Levesque. I actually live in Brookline, New Hampshire. I was a state representative and a state senator. I was raised in Nashua, and I attended public schools from kindergarten to high school. And I actually got my degrees in college in Nashua as well. I hold a master's degree. Now, I have a bit of a backstory. My family actually moved from Massachusetts, Roxbury, Mass. My dad worked at MIT, mom at Beth Israel Hospital. We moved to New Hampshire, to Nashua, and unfortunately, my parents divorced. And my mom died at the age of 47. And at that time, I brought up my brother, Mark, and my sister, Cindy. And I did this along with my husband, Scott. So we were like a little nucleus family. And I'm so proud of my brother and sister because they have grown up to be amazing contributors to our society. My sister is my business partner in our company, and my brother is a lawyer for one of the largest law firms in New Hampshire. I'm also a small business owner. I helped to start the Greater Nashua NAACP, along with Gloria Timmons, Alderman Timmons, and Alderman Linda Gathright, who was one of the first African-American aldermen in the city of Nashua. I'm very active in my community of Brookline. I was a Girl Scout secretary, a town trustee, and a church trustee. As a state representative, I was so proud to have spoken on the floor for marriage equality. We defined and fully funded adequate education, and I sponsored the emergency notification system bill that we use today. I'm also proud to be the first African-American state senator. I worked on making voting accessible with the smart, secure, modern, accurate registration technology. That was a SMART Act. Worked on ERIC, independent redistricting, family medical leave. We did pass rail and Juneteenth. So I'm running for executive council because these are not ordinary times. Our freedoms have never been more at risk than they are today. And we all need to do our part. As I learned in 9th grade typing class, that the saying you may have heard, now is a time for all good men and women to come to the aid of their country. That has been my mantra for the last 20 years of service, and that is my mantra today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melanie. And now if you'd like Shoshanna to give her introduction. Oh, mute. You're on mute, Shoshanna.
I was literally saying that to myself. I was so good at
Uh-huh.
muting myself, but I needed to unmute. I was saying thank you so much, Catherine, and for everyone who put this together. Really excited to be here with you all and talk a little bit about why I am running for executive council. My name is Shoshanna Kelly. I am a mother of 2 children who are in public schools here in Nashua. I'm an alderwoman at large. I've been in office for 7 years, and I also own an advertising agency, which is headquartered here in Nashua. I actually first ran for office back in 2016 and was elected as the first woman of color as an alderwoman at large at the same time as Alderman Gloria Timmons, who was, Linda Gathright, who was the first woman as a board of aldermen, ward alderman. So it was a pretty historic year. I always get frustrated in saying that because 2017 is far too long to go without a voice from someone who looks like me. But here we are. And I ran again in 2021. I really enjoy the work that I'm doing here in Nashua. And, you know, continuing that work for the last 7 years has just been such an honor and a joy. Here in Nashua, I've worked on big stuff and little stuff, all the stuff in between. I've worked on the things that we all hold dear, such as affordable housing. I've worked on energy environment. We just rolled out an incredible sustainability plan here in Nashua, where we're really leading the state, and I'm just so proud of that. And I also have done the nuts and bolts stuff. I've been on the budget committee every single year. Someone told me that you needed to do that. You learn so much about the city, and I really, really have. And I've loved every minute of it. And you get to really look at everything that's going on and make some tough choices. And, you know, the city has been very good at being fiscally responsible. I was also on the finance committee, which is also a really fun committee where you approve contracts over $10,000. As we get into what the executive council is, you'll see that that's direct experience. I'm also chair of the Personnel and Administrative Affairs Committee, which approves appointees from the mayor, another direct experience linked to the executive council. But I don't want to spend all 3 minutes talking about my qualifications. I really want to talk about my why. You know, my why is really rooted in the things that have been happening in this country and the type of leaders that have been put into office. I ran in 2016 because I was really sad when Trump was elected, and I cried for a week, and my daughter asked me why I was crying, and she asked me if Trump was going to crazy our country. And I told her that that the adults were going to take care of it. And for my part, that was running for office and winning and running again. And I felt the same way when the Dobbs decision came down. There were a lot of tears and frustration, and I looked at her and I said, you know what, I'm not going to let you have fewer rights than I've had my whole life. And so I ran for the executive council 2 years ago, feels like it was yesterday, and got very close. So I'm still out on a promise to my daughter and to all of the people here who have lost those rights or are on the verge of losing those rights. And I think the executive council is an incredibly important job where we can do a lot, especially with reproductive freedom. And that is why I am very excited to be the next counselor. You're unmuted.
Yep. Okay. I'm just going to leave it off now. Thank you. Thank you for your introduction, and that you mentioned that 3 minutes is a good reminder for me to go over some of the parameters for tonight's discussion. As attendees may be aware already that this is a forum to learn more about the candidates, not a debate. So we wanted to give each candidate an opportunity to introduce herself, and then we will go through a series of questions that I will ask, and each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer the questions. We'll alternate going first. And then there'll be an opportunity to respond briefly to the extent that a candidate references the other candidate that they want to clarify or respond briefly about their position. And then we'll have some closing comments. So if that sounds good, Melanie and Shoshanna, we're ready to go ahead. I'll just jump in with some questions and then we'll start with Melanie. My first question I want to ask, given that the executive council map is gerrymandered, it is likely that a success in executive council District 5 may still yield a Democratic minority in the body. How would you approach the work of the council, given that the current membership is very conservative? And we'll start with Melanie. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for the question. First of all, our goal for the next election, upcoming election, is to have a majority of Democrats. So are you asking how would I approach it if I was the only person on the council? I just need clarification.
Yeah, if I agree that is the goal. But if it continued to have a conservative majority, for instance, or given the current makeup, if you were working in that sort of context, what would be your approach?
Well, in that case, it would take a lot of working across the aisle. Getting to know each other, first of all, getting to know all of the counselors. And I think Cindy Warmington does a great job. She tries to find the common aspects wherever she can. So we're not going to agree on everything, but there are quite a few things that we can agree on. And as I understand it, 90% of the work we do at the council is approving contracts, and not an issue, but it's that 10% that are really important issues, which I cannot yield on, things like not having an education commissioner who doesn't have an education background. That is not acceptable. Also, not funding Planned Parenthood and other reproductive rights organizations. That is not acceptable, and not accepting federal funds is not. So I would still have to push back on those areas, and also make it well known that this is what we are standing for and what we are fighting for. And again, Cindy Warmington does an amazing job of that. But I'm working towards a majority.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
And Shoshanna, if you'd like to respond.
Yes, a majority would be nice, but in the absence of a majority, the only way I've worked is nonpartisan. We don't have, supposedly we're nonpartisan at the city, so everybody that I work with in my 15 group of aldermen is just across the aisle at all times. So we're just looking at what's in front of us, hearing from our constituents, and making sure that those things are brought to the table. And I think that's how you do the work in a setting like that. And, I know Cindy was mentioned, she does a great job of bringing light to things, even if she doesn't get the vote. She talks about Planned Parenthood. She has called out and gone toe to toe with the governor about that decision again and again. So you have to be willing to speak up and say your truth, even if it's not necessarily going to be a yes on it, and keep the conversation of, we are a majority. We are a majority Democratic in this state, but because of the gerrymander, we don't always see that in the votes.
Fair enough. Actually, this is giving me an opportunity to jump to a question maybe we touched on a little bit here. The council needs to approve contracts that the state engages in with a value of more than $10,000. And there have been votes to defund programs such as Planned Parenthood, and also votes to issue contracts where there have potentially been some conflicts of interest with the administration. What skill set do you bring, and what each of you bring, and what strategy would you deploy to argue or persuade a potential Republican majority to do the right thing? Somewhat related to the prior question. Do we want to switch? Shoshanna, do you want to answer first this time? We'll switch back and forth.
Yeah, no problem. So like I said before, I was on the finance committee for the first 4 years, and that's literally what we do, is pour through those documents. It's very important that you're looking at those, not only for, the nuts and bolts of what the contract is, but what kind of company are we giving taxpayer dollars to? Are they paying a fair wage? Are they equitable in how they treat their employees? And are there any errors in the contract? So there is some long work to be done before you, and a lot of them get it printed. I will not be getting it printed, but there's a large stack of contracts that go in front of you, and just doing the hard, long work there is how we make sure that we're asking the right questions and making sure that the money is being spent appropriately.
Okay, thank you. And Melanie, how about you? What are your thoughts on what skills and strategies you would bring to arguing or persuading with a potential Republican majority on these sorts of contracts?
Yeah, well, as a business owner, I too have worked with many contracts, and I also write contracts. So reading the contracts is not an issue, but the intent is very important to understand. As Shoshanna said, as far as their employment practices, are they hiring New Hampshire folks? Are they compliant to some of the groups that we really care about and we listen to, like the SEIU, like the AFL-CIO, are they in keeping with what they're looking for as well? And also, as far as our teachers are concerned, our educators, we need to have conversations with them to also understand, for example, if we're looking at a commissioner, and get a little bit of intel on them, or a contract that is coming up. There may be something that we're missing in that contract. So it would be very helpful to have the input of our partners that care about the things that we value.
Thank you. And actually, maybe I can ask a follow-up question to that, if I may. Just if you could each talk about sort of the partnerships you've worked with that you think that would inform those kind of relationships. Melanie, I guess I'll let you go first and then go back to Shoshanna.
Well, as a senator and as a representative, I've worked with commissioners like the Department of Safety Commissioner, the Secretary of State, who's not a commissioner, but he does have a lot of influence. So working with these commissioners, working with other organizations that we partner with, understanding Planned Parenthood's needs, I think that's really going to be critical to help us to determine whether to go with the contract or not go with the contract. We need that kind of input.
Okay, thank you. Shoshanna?
So yeah, very much like in Nashua, I know all of the department heads here, and I'm talking to them and asking them questions before we vote on any contracts or budget items. I think it's really important that you do that outreach and have that discussion, because what's on the paper isn't always necessarily the full story. I love your cat. Sorry.
Thank you.
Getting distracted by your adorable cat. So yes, I think that's really critical, but I think the other piece that we have to do that we are just not doing, I mean, I'm knocking doors with people and people still don't know what the executive council is talking to the district. Because yes, we have the ability as executive counselors to talk to all the people who are in these, big positions, but ultimately the people who put us there are you, the people, and we should be asking you guys often what you think and what we can do better.
Okay, thank you. My next question relates to the governor's race. The outcome of this year's gubernatorial race plays a significant role in the next executive council. My question is how would you approach the role of council change if there's a Republican governor versus a Democratic governor? And maybe in the context of this question, you could explain a little bit to those on the call today about how the executive council works with the governor, to your point, Shoshanna.
Yeah, I'm surprised we haven't gotten there yet. And I think Melanie's turn to go first. Is that true?
I guess I did the follow-up to Melanie first, so I guess Shoshanna, I'll let you go first this time. I'll do it that way.
And I might ask you to repeat the question. I know.
Yes,
sorry.
that's fine. I just talking about how the outcome of the governor's race has a big impact on the next executive council. So question is, how would your approach to the role of a council change if it's a Republican governor versus a Democratic governor? But that might also involve explaining a little bit more too about the dynamics of how the executive council works with the governor.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I'll start with that because I don't think we've actually covered that. So I'll just give that quick thing and then I'll answer that. So the executive council, I say, is the most powerful job nobody knows about. I talk about three main things, which is approving contracts over $10,000 for the state, approving commissioners. I know Melanie mentioned that, judges, State Board of Education. They actually also have a voice on pardons. So a lot of really important things there. And then they also steward through the 10-year transportation plan as well as the state budget. So big role, lots of things that get done and go through. And candidly, my answer to how I would approach the role, whether it was a Republican or a Democrat, is I wouldn't change how I do it. I'm still a representative of the people who's going to vote the way that they are asking me to vote. And I'm still going to be thorough and thoughtful about anything that comes with us, judgeships or not. If it's a Democratic governor, but I have qualms about somebody, I'm gonna ask them about it. I'm gonna talk to them about it. I'm not going to, put that aside. I think it's really important that the work just gets done, and that it gets done in an impartial way, where we bring a voice for the people.
Thank you. Thank you for a little bit of explanation. Melanie,
you.
if you want to add to that.
Yeah, that was a great answer, and similar to the previous question that you asked us, when working with a Democrat or Republican, we always need to be working together and to be amicable. You know, we're not looking for any fights here. We're trying to get the work done for our people. So we would do that. And as Shoshanna said, we do listen to our people as well, and those partners that value what we value as well. But there are going to be times that we don't agree with each other. And again, we need to hold, to our principles and work together when we can, whether it's the council or the governor.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You've touched on this a little bit already, each of you, but talking about how I wanted to ask you how your experience in politics or otherwise, as you started to say in your introduction, has sort of shaped the values that you'll bring to Concord as an executive counselor. Now we'll start with Melanie this time.
Okay, thank you. Well, my experience is really as a legislator, as a senator, as a representative, trying to pass bills and passing bills, but not being able to get them funded, possibly. Our government is like a three-legged stool. We have our House and Senate that actually pass bills. We have our governor who will either pass or veto, but as executive counselors, we can actually take away the funding. And similar things have happened with rail. So that's an important issue to Nashua, to the surrounding areas, to Manchester. And we've actually lost that funding. So other areas, we talked about Planned Parenthood, we haven't talked about COVID relief, but that's another issue as well. So, there are going to be times that we will possibly lose the funding. I would really recommend working with some of the commissioners, some of the department heads, looking for other funds so that we can fill that gap.
And
Thank
the question, just so I can remind myself, is my specific experience.
Well, yes, your experience in politics or otherwise, how they shaped your values that you would bring to Concord as an executive counselor. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm happy to repeat the questions. I realize we get further into the discussion.
Yeah, that's good. We're good. So I'm gonna answer this in two ways. Obviously, I talked a little bit about my actual experience as an alderwoman, really being a recent legislator that is working every single day with everyone from the mayor on down. I know what Nashua needs, and Nashua has changed a lot in the last 10, 15 years. We've lived here now longer than we've lived in our hometown. And it is the biggest city in the district, but I also have lived rurally, and I know what that looks like. I know what it's like to need your roads and bridges taken care of, or your broadband taken care of. So I have that too. And when it comes to values, I think that the parts of me that I bring forward really allow me to talk about the kind of lived experience that I've had and how I can bring that to the table, because we don't always have that at these tables specifically. So I have two kids who are currently in the public school system. I'm a legislator who lived through the COVID-19 pandemic, and that was an incredibly interesting time to be a legislator. I am a business owner who is trying to hire people right out of college right now. I know what the cost of insurance is. I know what the cost of groceries are. You know, I know all those things, and I bring all those things with me every time I step into this role.
Thank you. And along the lines of what your values are, your experience that have shaped your coming into this race, we've touched on that a large part of the executive council job is confirming governor's nominations to executive departments, courts, other state boards. So what qualities or characteristics would you look for in those nominees? Shoshanna, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So we're talking about approving, right? So
yes, confirming nominations, right?
Can we start with just being qualified? Because we already have a problem where many of the things that are happening are, you know, people who are coming in and are unqualified. We have a commissioner of education who never stepped foot in a public school before he was put in this role. And look what that's doing to our education system. It's completely decimating it from the inside. You cannot have a leader sitting at the top that is unqualified and does not believe in the position in which he is actually heading up. And we all know that one for sure. But qualifications are really important in other ways. I've talked to people about judgeships. I had someone say to me, gosh, there was a judge that was put in that's never done family law. Imagine what that looks like. Imagine what that does to those families. If you haven't been in family law, you know, Catherine, you're a lawyer. Like, it is a very different type of law. And so qualifications aren't just the governor put them forward, even down to the commissioner of agriculture. The one we have now, he was a chicken farmer. Great. But our organic farming program has been completely decimated because of the decisions that he's made. And when you think about that, chicken farming is way different than tomatoes or things like that have really been affected by climate change, and they've had really hard years. So qualifications, I think, are incredibly important, and really doing the work and asking thoughtful questions to make sure that the qualification is deeper than just, you know, what's in front of you. Oh, they're a lawyer. Great. No problem. We have to go deeper than that.
Great. Melanie?
Yeah, I would definitely have to agree with the qualifications. I saw Commissioner Edelbluth's resume, and there's no education on it, so that would be a huge red flag. Regardless of what the position is, we should not be choosing commissioners or judges based on our friendships. And also, we don't want to have people that are making decisions based on ideology, whether it's an education or a judge. It's really critical that they are fair-minded and have a history of doing the work of the people. Short
Thank
answer.
you. Yeah, no, thank you. In talking about the experience or lack of experience that some nominees may have, it also goes back to some of the skill sets you would need executive counsel as an executive counselor. You touched on this a little bit earlier, but can you speak a little more about your experience with writing or reviewing large contracts? Or if you talked about your service background, your legal or business or government background directly related to contracts. We'll start with Melanie.
Yes. So as far as the contracts are concerned, they are, you know, somewhat templated. There's certain things that you would always find in those contracts. But they do need to be scrutinized, and we do need to touch base with our partners to understand if there may be some issues that they're concerned about within a contract that we're not aware of. So having that open communication is very important.
Okay. And Shoshanna, do you have thoughts? Thank you.
I'm just thinking about my my normal Board of Aldermen agenda that's 200 pages because, you know, 199 of them are contracts. So very astute at going through them, looking for, you know, specific things, making sure it's lining up. And then, you know, you get a second bite of the apple too, because it goes through the Board of Aldermen, then it goes to the Finance Committee. So you have an additional set of eyes looking at it again. And I think that kind of scrutiny is really important. I also write contracts for my business. So know what that looks like and what kinds of things we need to make sure are in there.
Thank you. I also just wanted to mention, because I saw it pop up Katie, we're about halfway through, and so I wanted to mention to everyone attending, if you do have questions you'd like to have asked, you can put them in the chat while we continue to work through some of the questions that I have, and try to get to those if we, depending on the time at the end. Okay, so much of the job of the Executive Council involves statewide issues. However, as the Executive Counselor for your district, how would you advocate for the people of District 5 specifically? What are the issues that are most prominent in your mind for the district? What can the governor do to help with these issues? If you could touch on that. Shoshanna, I'll start with you.
So, I mean, the issues that we're hearing right now are a lot around economics. And I think that the Executive Council has a lot of say in that, in terms of looking at the budget, making sure that we're not signing on to pieces of policy that are going to continue to take away from people's pocketbooks. We know the voucher system's out of control. We know that the state has not been paying their full amount for pensions, which comes down to the cities. And we have to make up that deficit here. So I think, affordable housing is one of those as well. It's all of these things are adding up to an extreme strain on people. And I'm hearing that a lot. You asked about District 5. That's what I'm hearing most. Commuter rails up there, as well as reproductive freedom. I know that that's been mentioned as well. And so those are things that I'm hearing from people as I'm hitting the doors and talking to them. But I do like to say that it's 5 people. It's only 5 people up there, and I'm never going to close my door if someone from District 4 mentions something to me. That's not part of the job. That's not how that works. We as a 5-person body have the opportunity to bring voice to people. So,
thank you, Melanie.
Well, first of all, as I'm going around and talking with people, the most important thing that we do and that we listen to is people when we talk about what the Executive Council is, because most people don't have a clue of what it is. So we're in the position of educating people, which is very important. And when we talk about reproductive rights being defunded, and we talk about the Education Commissioner and federal dollars for COVID not being accepted and rail stopped, then people are concerned. But other than that, they don't necessarily know what the Executive Council is. So it is my pleasure to educate people, and we're trying to find a way that is most succinct to help people understand that. But once they do, they are very concerned. They're very concerned about our competitor, David Wheeler, their current counselor. Many people don't know about him. But another issue, and we talked about constituent services. Constituent services has always been very important to me as a state rep, as a state senator, and many times I would get calls from all over the state, different people across the state, and I was able to help them or connect them to their senator, at least to give them some direction and give them answers. And I would say that's probably the biggest way that is unique that we can help our constituents. The issues of reproductive rights, yes. The issues of rail, yes, a concern. Education, a concern. Not taking federal dollars is a deep concern, and we have to educate people on that.
if I could respond, Catherine.
Sure.
It's just a yes and here. I was really excited to hear you bring up constituent services, because it's very clear that David Wheeler is doing nothing to speak to his constituents.
Oh.
Because he's been in office and running for office since 1988, and there are still people in this district who don't know who he is or what this office is. So I think whoever is the executive counselor it is incumbent upon them to start talking to people about the job and involving them in the work that is being done, and not hiding.
Thank you. That's helpful. Melanie, did you have anything to add to that?
No, just we don't hide. I mean, we're all about being out. You all know, any of you who have done door knocking or served, that we as Democrats, we really want to be out there. We want to hear our people. And many times we go where they are. I was in church this morning in Amherst, and it was great. So yeah, we're not going to hide. People will know who we are. Good point, Shoshanna.
This is actually a good jumping off point, because we're getting some questions from folks asking about Dave Wheeler and his performance and
That's
wanting to
tough.
hear you speak to Dave. So you anticipated some of those questions, I think. Could you either, or I guess now I've forgotten what, I think I will start with Melanie this time. Is that right? Did I start with you last?
I
No,
don't remember.
all right, I'll start with Melanie this time. Is there a particular area where you feel like you have strengths over Dave Wheeler, or where you want to take the fight to him, or how you want to approach him as a opponent in the election?
Well, I think in just about all the areas, the big areas that he has voted on have been very harmful. And I would actually like to ask him, if I had an opportunity to see him, why he votes a certain way. Now, at the end of the day, he has his reasons. We need to unseat him so that we can take over the council, and so that we can realize these goals and objectives that we have. And the way we do that is by educating people to let them know who he is.
All right. I can't wait to talk about Dave Wheeler. Let's talk about Dave Wheeler. Let's start with transparency. There was a article that came out that he wasn't even logging his votes. He would just say nothing and then hand a note telling the clerk which things he voted no on. I think, Republican or Democrat, your job as a legislator is to be open, transparent, and vote. And if you cannot vote on a roll call, that's a real problem to me. People should know how you're voting, and he's done especially well at constantly flying under the radar. And I'm done with it. I would like people to know how he's voting, that he's not including his votes, and that he is unwilling to even really have conversations. He rarely talks at these meetings. He rarely brings things up. I went to a recent meeting where the tannery project here in Nashua came up for funding. He didn't say a word. The tannery is something that this city has been working on for decades. It is a huge deal that we now have the funding to take that Superfund site and turn it into affordable housing in here, and it wasn't even mentioned.
Interesting.
I get a little fired up about him.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And my next question might not seem directly related, but I'm kind of curious now to hear about Councilor Wheeler, if he participates in this way. But we often see well, I guess we do see him in photos. We see photos of all 5 council members going to different places around the state to celebrate special activities or accomplishments. So I wanted to ask you if you enjoy celebrating those kind of successes, or how you feel about building the personal relationships with other council members, not him necessarily, obviously, in this seat, but if you were, fierce opponents on the issues in the council, but also are traveling the state and serving together in that capacity, how those relationships would look.
Yeah, I think that is
Shoshanna?
a really joyful part of the job. We're ribbon cutting tomorrow at the Moynihan Manor, which is something that we've been working on for a very long time. Going to the opening of the Nashua City Center for the Arts, which is something that had been worked on for decades. And hearing people say things like, "Oh gosh, this has been a long time coming," I think is really important. And I think no matter what the job, whether you're working in an advertising agency or as an executive counselor, you have to find ways to build relationship with the people that you're going to be working with. You don't have to love them. You don't have to agree with them, but you do have to find ways to build relationships so that we can get things done for the people.
Thank you. And Melanie?
Yes, well, I had the opportunity to work in the Senate. So we did work with Republicans and Democrats, and oftentimes we did not agree. However, we were able to be very civil with each other and even develop friendships and relationships with each other. So I think that's really important. We need to be able to celebrate the victories that we have. So if we have a new bridge, or, if we funded another project and we're going around the country to recognize that, we need to have a united front. This is good for our people. And I really want to be, one of those team players. So, yes.
Great. Thank you. And I have a couple of questions that are sort of issue specific, I guess, and those are things obviously you'd be going around we're already going around talking with voters about. But for instance, you touched on rail earlier in the discussion. The Executive Council has both approved and opposed funding contracts to propose options for expanded passenger rail between Boston and Concord. Funding, Concord, New Hampshire. Funding could allow the Bureau of Rail and Transit of the New Hampshire DOT to study and operate public transit options along that corridor, the Capital Corridor, which is about 80 miles, including establishing passenger rail service in the Lowell, Nashua, Manchester portion of the corridor, and then expanding service to Concord. If you could each speak about whether you support funding for expanded commuter rail options for the Capital Corridor, and how you think commuter rail will help or hurt our state. We'll start with Melanie this time.
Oh, is it my turn? Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Tell me if I'm getting it mixed up, but yes.
No, you're right.
I had the honor of sponsoring the bill that allowed us to fund and design this version of commuter rail. So I was very close to that, and this is something that is definitely needed. I mean, Nashua has a great need for commuter rail. They've got the tracks and everything. They have rail committees within Nashua that meet to talk about the advancement of commuter rail. This rail would go from Nashua to Manchester, but it would also connect to Massachusetts. I was talking with somebody in Francistown about the rail project, and they were excited. Talked with somebody in Amherst today about the rail project that had been stopped, and they were excited. So the surrounding towns want the rail as well. Businesses want the rail. What we run into is that there is a monopoly with the buses. There is a strong lobby to keep the buses. So we've got to find some way that we can have both. I talked with somebody who mentioned having light rail from Portsmouth into Manchester. And those are the types of things that we need to think about for future.
Thank you.
So
Shoshanna?
I am on the rail committee here in Nashua, so I have experience hearing
Yeah.
what we're hearing. Where, I was very frustrated with when just after narrowly losing to Wheeler, they actually defunded the rest of the study that Melanie was talking about, and the repercussions of that in Nashua were, well, what do we do next? How do we potentially continue this conversation? But over and over again in those committees, I actually took the bus to Boston for the first 10 years of my career, it just continues to ping pong back and forth. We get it so far, then it gets defunded. We get someone who's for it, but then it doesn't go far enough, and then it gets pushed back again. And so, but from the studies that business owners like myself, are for this. It allows us to bring in more talent. It allows us to grow economically. It'll bring more people to our cities as well. If they can just hop on the train and come up and see a show, we know they're economic drivers, and it's really, really important to not just Nashua, but the whole state. The fact that we are just so disconnected is very tough for people. And I for one, am a proud advocate for it. Because I think there's a lot of good to be had, but we got to stop the political back and forth.
Yeah, thank you. And that actually makes me want to ask a follow-up question. How you would address, or how you do address it now. Melanie referenced talking to someone in Amherst, I guess just today, where with constituents in more rural districts, maybe who are not either as engaged in the conversation or rail, what their feelings might be on rail, and how you talk about it with constituents in different parts of your in different parts of the district. Shoshanna, I'll go to you first.
Thank you. I think rail is important, and we know that overall it has done really well. People are for it and want to be able to get on the train and go to a Red Sox game and not have to worry about parking. Was over $50 the last time I was at a Red Sox game, and that was to walk a mile. So I think that there's that, but I also think it has to be a lot like what I talk about at the budget committee. It's not this or that. Just because we get commuter rail doesn't mean we can't also work on broadband or make sure that their bridge gets taken care of, or increase the funding that works on their streets. So I think sometimes it gets pitted as a city versus the rural, but I think that it will help everybody. And it doesn't have to be, oh, if we get commuter rail, we're not also going to do things for infrastructure in the smaller towns.
Thanks. Melanie?
Yes, so as I've talked to people that are more in the outskirts and more rural towns, they're actually looking for a greater expansion of rail. So we need to start somewhere. Many of them are looking for that. We also have people who understand that we need a robust infrastructure, and rail is a big piece of that. And in addition, it does help the state's economy. Even if it only runs to Manchester, it would still bring in more money to our state. So those are advantages. Those are things that I've heard people say, and those are things that I would also say to others as we have this conversation.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Another topic that we're getting questions are about the education freedom accounts, the voucher program. And I understand that the different branches of our state government have different roles to play in how we respond to these accounts or how we manage them. But if you could each speak to, as an executive counselor, what your approach to discussing the educational freedom accounts would be. Start with Melanie.
Well, let's work towards getting a majority in the executive council, because we really do need to stop the vouchers. We really do need a commissioner that will be responsible for the education of 170,000 students. So that is really our goal. Now, are you asking if we can't reach our goal?
Well, I guess the question is for people, what can the executive council do, basically, at this point? And you touched on, obviously, the nominees for commissioners, but what can the executive counselor, what can you do as an executive counselor if you have concerns about the educational freedom accounts? Back to Melanie. That wasn't clear, so I'll go back to Melanie and I'll give you extra time, Shoshanna, to answer.
First of all, not having a commissioner of education who supports that. So in 2025, Edelbluth's term will be up. So, we would want to vote him out. Also, we've got funding issues that we need to look at. And if we have the majority, we will have the voice to push back on funding through our state dollars for the education freedom accounts. We also need more transparency in that department as well. And I know a lot of that comes through the legislature, but we want to be able to do anything that we can to make sure that we have more accountability for the EFAs.
Thank you. Shoshanna.
I don't know if this is a favorite or least favorite topic, but we'll go with it gets me fired up. First and foremost, I will never vote to expand the voucher system. I think that in a state where we're already struggling just to make sure that we are giving children an adequate education, and we're still not meeting that, and it has been put into law that we need to do that, we cannot be then additionally putting our education system at a deficit through these vouchers. I am a mom of a child who has a 504, and long before I was even in an elected office, I went right up to Governor Sununu and I told him that I was very angry about the voucher system. And he said, oh, it just gives, opportunities to people. And I said, absolutely not. What it does is it takes money away from the public schools who have to take children like my child by law and puts it in private schools that do not have to. And I will not be okay with that in my state. And I'm still fighting as hard as I can every day to make sure that that stops, because it's just not equitable or fair for our future.
Well, thank you. But I will say, as a state rep, I'm very aware of some of the damage that's been done by bills in the legislature, and I realize that it takes all of us in different offices to affect change here. So I realize that what you're doing in the executive council is not the same as we're doing necessarily in the legislature, but we all need to be working hand in hand, I think I'd say. So thank you. I know we are getting somewhat near the end of our time, and I want to give you, before we get to letting you guys give closing statements, I want to make sure if anyone has any other questions to submit, they can do so now. I did just want to give you, as a final question, I guess I'll say, you're both very qualified candidates, and we're heading into an intense fall. Should you win the primary, each of you, what is your strategy to win at the polls in November over your opponent?
I
Shoshana.
don't know whose turn it is to go first.
I think I'll go to Shoshana. I think it's because you spoke last, so I think it's your turn this time.
Great question. And having run in this district before, I know the district, and I know what it takes to do this. And I know it takes a lot of energy, and, you know, you're running around, you're going an hour here and an hour there, and you're doing it so that you can talk to people, hear what they really want to see, and then react to that and make sure that they understand that you will be the person who will bring that voice to the executive council table. So, I think that is, you know, a critical piece of making sure that we win in the fall is talking about the office, talking to people, making sure they understand how powerful it is, because it is a very hard race to run, because people don't know what we do. So we have to spend a lot of time explaining that, and then explain why we are the best person for the job. So it is a big job, but it is one that I did 2 years ago and got very, very close. And I think the foundation that I built of name recognition and coalitions and people in all of these states will help me to be victorious in November.
Okay, thank you. And Melanie, how about you? What would be your strategy to win, and what will
Yes.
be your strategy going into the fall?
Thank you. First of all, a strategy would be to bring together this coalition that I have been working on developing since I've been a senator. Since I've been a state representative, I have alliances within the 9 towns that I served, and I have visited and I have made connections in the 34 towns that I will be serving. So bringing together this coalition from all of the towns, helping to educate them and to have them understand how critical the executive council is. And I feel that they are understanding that, but we will continue to do that. And then there's going to have to be a strategy to go up against Wheeler. My strategy is to understand more about his vulnerabilities so that we can be positioned to answer back and to be victorious at the end of the day.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Now we are for the last few minutes. I want to give you time to make your closing statements. Thank you for the input from our attendees that I was able to see. And I will give you each 3 minutes to make a closing statement, closing comments. And Shoshana, we'll have you go first this time since we started with Melanie last time on openings.
I thought I was ending, but that's okay. I'm happy to go first.
Oh, okay.
That's totally fine.
Okay.
I'm fine to go. I was
Okay.
pulling out to make sure I hit the 3 minutes, but that's fine. Okay.
I will hit it for you. I'll watch it. Go ahead.
Okay. So, you know, I think that we've had a lot of really great conversation tonight, and I just want to go back to my why. The reason I'm in this is because I feel very strongly in the future. I think that the president did an incredible job and such an important thing by recognizing what needed to happen and putting country over self and handing the baton to a new generation of leadership. I am part of that new generation of leadership. I know what the cost of things are right now. I'm in talking to people every single day who are up against the same things: childcare costs, grocery costs. How am I going to pay my mortgage? How can I buy a house? How can I buy a house when houses are, you know, more than $750,000 in most cases in Nashua? Those are the types of things that no matter what office you're in, you are helping people to bring voice to. And I think that that is incredibly important. I know that over my last 7 years, I've proven that you can be a working mom and a business owner and still get a lot of things done as a legislator. And I promise that I will continue to do that on the Executive Council.
Thank you, Shoshana. And I will also give Melanie a chance to reset my timer, but you guys are fine on time.
Well, thank you very much for giving me time today. This particular job is a very critical job. As was stated earlier, it's the most powerful job that most people don't know about. I bring to the table executive leadership, from being a state representative, from being a senator, from working with agency commissioners. I have a broad understanding of how our state functions. So one of the reasons why I ran for this office was I saw one of our gubernatorial candidates speak, and I said that we've got to have a strong candidate to beat David Wheeler. I have been out there working with people since I have been a state senator across the district and as a state representative as well. This is a really important time, and I think we have good people running. This is going to take our all and our very best to win this race. So I have the leadership, I have the background and the determination to see this through. So I hope that you'll vote for me and tell your constituents how important it is and vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you both. I appreciate it. I know we're almost at our end. I wanted to ask Katie or Bev, if they're still on here, if there's anything you'd like to cover still or anything we would like to touch on before we wrap up.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. I just really like to, I have a few closing comments. First of all, I'd like to thank you, everyone here for attending and participating tonight. Special thanks to you, State Rep Rombeau, for leading tonight's discussion with the candidates. Shoshanna and Melanie, all of us really appreciate you running for office. We know what a big commitment it is, and we're very fortunate to have you both as excellent, well-qualified candidates. It's a super hard decision. I don't live in your district, so I'm glad I don't have to make it. We will follow up with registered attendees with a link to the recording, which we ask that you share. And I just want to also update folks on a few upcoming events that the Hillsborough County Democratic Committee is hosting. 2 weeks from now, we'll be hosting a similar Zoom forum, this time for the Congressional District 2 candidates, Maggie Goodlander and Colin Van Ostern. More information and registration link will come out this week. Also, on the weekend of September 6th through 8th, we'll be hosting a booth at the Hillsborough County Agricultural Fair in New Boston. So if you attend, and please do stop by and say hello. If you're a candidate, we'll be reaching out to you to get some lit and signs from you for our booth. Lastly, the Hillsborough County Democrats are holding our annual picnic on Sunday, September 22nd. That's from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. We have some wonderful speakers lined up. More on that to come. Tickets are now on sale. So please purchase your tickets soon. We'd love to see you there. And we'll also put that ticket link, which I also put in the chat, but we'll put that in the email follow-up. So again, thanks for attending, everybody, and have a super night.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Bye,
Thank you
everybody.
all.
Have a great night.